So thank you so much, Wilson. My name's Beverly, once again. Working closely with the She Decides Kenya local movement, supporting them in the day-to-day Kenya local movement activities. So basically for us as a movement, as Jabu highlighted before, we launched it around March. And the key things that we've really tried to do is connecting the dots, ensuring that we're working together and ensuring that we are bringing everybody on board. So leaving no one behind per se. So ensuring that the youth voices, champions such as political leaders are closely working with us, influencers, social media influencers, and basically just ensuring that like-minded CSOs are on board in the work that we're doing. So I'll just be talking briefly around best practice that we've been adopting as the Kenya local movement that is working closely with the political leaders and other champions like influencers, as I've mentioned. We've also had male champions because we're well conversant that this movement is not just a women's movement, but it's also bringing men together to support women issues, women and girls issues. So briefly, that is what we've been doing. And through that, we've seen a great progress. We recently had the standards and guidelines reinstated, and Honorable Esther Passaris, also with other like-minded partners such as CRR, Kellyn, who are here, were part of that initiative. And we've seen her fronting a lot of work around access to safe abortion, access to services for women and girls. So we've seen a lot of progress with working with champions. You want to hold hands with people that are passionate about these issues, first of all, yeah? Like Honorable Esther Passaris, as I've said, she's been very optimistic and leading these conversations, yeah? So basically just mapping out and seeing who are progressive leaders, who are into these conversations around SRH, yeah? Also, I think it's very key because even in line with their own manifestos, these are things that they want to see. She's very passionate about maternal mortality. So these are things that you can pick up and fine-tune with the She Decides movement agenda and ensure that at the end of the day, you're also reaching your goal, yeah.
Thank you very much. So what I'm getting from here is champions don't become champions when you appoint them, right? Their track record has to speak into us making a decision, right? Because I always worry about that, because we've seen some champions in certain spaces who we expect all of a sudden to transform and then put on a champion garment, while their track record doesn't speak to anything like that. So thank you guys for doing that. Now, last question to you is, so if we're going to develop a tool for selecting champions, what do you think this tool would look like? That would help other local movements as well.
I think maybe first of all, the first thing is to look at what are the goals of these champions. There also has to be something in it for them at the end of the day. So you have to also ensure what you're pushing for is what they also want to see at the end of the day. I go back to what I've said about Honorable Esther Passaris and also the champions that we have here. These are people who are passionate about maternal mortality, yeah? So how do you tackle issues around maternal mortality, linking it to what they're doing, yeah? Another thing would be like, for example, we're having social media influencers. How do you ensure that your messages, because like the influencers that we are our champions, something that we really seek to see from them is that they're pushing messages around women and girls in terms of access to services, safe abortion services, in terms of access to contraceptives. So ensuring that the messages are well developed and speak to the She Decides manifesto at the end of the day, yeah.
First and foremost, I usually tell some of my friends that we lead and others follow. So, and I think it's been clear also with She Decides that we were the very first country to officially launch the She Decides movement, but not only launch, but also inspire other countries like Kenya, like Tanzania, even Nigeria and others to also get on ground and take action.
Awesome.
Actually, that reminds me when you're asking how a champion is. You know I'm a champion. of She Decides, right? A global champion to that effect.
Uh-huh.
And the best definition of a champion is to say that you must be a disruptor. You get it? You must get out of your way to rewrite the wrongs. Having been one of the people that has inspired movements to take center stage, I want to note the following. One is that the core of She Decides is at the grassroots. Whatever we're talking about, all this conversation makes sense at the grassroots, because that is where we are seeing all the kind of things that we're talking about. I don't know who is not so tired of girls using all sorts of crude methods to abort. When you do something and you do not document it, then it has not happened.
Yes.
That's one thing you need to know. And especially now in an event that we are in an era of communication. So whatever you do, the opposition is very smart. They write their sermons, literally they own radio stations, they own TV stations. They have even become so smart online, and you find pastors featuring their sermon online on a daily basis. So their message is going across, well documented, well prepared. So if we're going to do stuff and we have not planned to document it and properly communicate it out there, then we're not going to hit the target, right? So for us back home, we are definitely very keen, and you've been seeing the different communication tools that we use, and every time we do something, we throw it out to the public, both to the opposition, to the government, and also to the people who are concerned, the young people, the daughters and girls, the young women, the activists and others. I want to note one is that speaking about tools that we use, not platforms, because you all know the platforms, communication platforms, right? The digital, blah, 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 social media and all that. But specifically the tools, there are tools that appeal more to your target. And of course, you also have to define who are you targeting. Like for me, I know, yes, my minister might be active on Twitter, but she's not the one running her account.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So if I want a message to be clear, there are two ways. I can either write to her directly an email, or we can actually write an actual statement and make sure it is delivered to her table. So that goes back to defining who is my target before I even think about the tools that I use. But oftentimes you've seen, like for example, visual. Info that is highly visual and imagery is likely to be received than info that is more text and stuff like that. Yeah. And oftentimes, like you've seen in Uganda when we're doing stuff, we are very keen on simple details. Like for example, what kind of pictures go online? We want to make sure that we have a whole photography team on board that is going to have our pictorial clear, our videography clear, You write a blog, for example. You see, oftentimes we release newsletters. In these newsletters, we make sure that every single small story is followed with a link, which link leads you to a blog or a website, because that way now you're going to start tapping into the eyes of the people that are deeply involved in what you're talking about. Almost 800 million people in Africa use WhatsApp on a daily basis, or rather use WhatsApp throughout an entire year. At least 800 million people are able to get on their phones. Either they have borrowed their phone or something, and then billions of messages crossing, So that clearly tells us some of the tools that are available. And let me tell you something. Talking about cost effectiveness, then definitely we have to go digital, Let me tell you, the cost of doing a radio production, a radio talk show, like for example, Nelly is at Citizen TV right now, right? I want to assume, as someone who runs an organization and who has budgets that I run, that did not cost less than, let's say, $2,000, right? Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, I can sit here, right, and do make this show live, right? And when we properly planned and everyone has shared with their social media platforms and all that, and you'll get about 100,000 people watching live at zero cost. You can do a podcast, right? And then share it through WhatsApp. Just 5 minutes podcast.
So what we did, we said we want to do ICPD 25 in Tanzania caravan, and then we also want to ask young people what does it mean when she decides, and what does it mean when she doesn't decide? And then we said, okay, so how are we going to get support? Because first of all, you need, in Tanzania environment now, you need to get government support. You can't just travel the caravan on 13 region and you're going to talk to young people under 30 without permission. So we had to go, and then we said, okay, so who else we can involve? We had to involve the government. And then by that time, Minister of Health, she knows about She Decides, ICPD, because they all have to come to Nairobi and say something about ICPD commitment and things like that. So we had to put them on board. But at the end of the time, we said we also want what we are going to find out from young people need to be on the position paper or whatever government is submitting. I don't know what it's called. I think commitment or something, you know. So that was very easy. We had to sit down with the government, and then we had to talk to them about what we are planning to do, and then they had to support us, because at the end of the time, they're also doing that. But at the end of the time, they don't really know what do young people want. It's all the time we only get what young people want in general in TDHS. That's a health survey, right? Like you hear in 27% of young people are pregnant in Tanzania, but you really don't know like how. How is that happening? So we said, okay, let's just not generalize. Let's go back to the community and talk to young people. Not only young people, but the people they live with, parents, teachers, traditional churches. So we just went with the caravan. It took us, I think, 25 or 27 days. And it was a very good experience for myself, because I'd never been to all those regions. And then what we did, we worked with the government and the partners who supported us, like UNFPA, to say, okay, Tanzania is very big. We are like 25 regions. We couldn't go to all the regions. We said, okay, so let's go to data. What is data saying? So which regions need us to go? We couldn't go to, as I said, we couldn't go across Tanzania. We didn't have time. We didn't have those resources. So we went. Tanzania, there are some regions which are very high in teenage pregnancy, FGM, and all that. So what we did, we worked with the government and the partner. We selected those regions. Those regions were urgent region, and then we also went to regions where they didn't have partners. We have regions which many partners are not there. It's just because it's far. But at the end of the time, those are the regions which young people are falling pregnant, you know, unsafe for abortion